Ladies and gentlemen, what is going on? I'm Dave LaFave, and you are watching Primetime Carolina. My co-host Tanner Blue could not make it here tonight, but that's okay because I'm here with you. We're going to do this episode anyway. It's a one-man show tonight. That's okay. We're going to make it work. Before we get going, I just want to say thank you to all our new subscribers. Shout out to you guys. You're awesome. The channel is growing. Um, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit subscribe on YouTube. We're trying to get to 300 before the Panthers kick off week 1. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find us on all the social media sites. Go ahead and do that as well. Give us a follow. The channel's growing, man. Hop on the train. So tonight we're going to be looking at the Panthers roster. We're going to be trying to project the 53-man roster that's going to make it out of training camp. Training camp, which starts boom, boom, boom this week. Players reported for training camp today. Ton of coverage all over the internet. I hope you saw it. It's a lot of good stuff, a lot of cool interviews with players. The Panthers YouTube account posted a bunch of interviews with players as they arrived at training camp today, so that was cool to watch. If you haven't watched those, I recommend it. But anyway, let's get on with the show. So we are looking at so right now I'm on the Panthers website. I'm just going to go straight down the list. I've got it organized by position. Those positions are alphabetical. The first two guys you see are centers, or they're listed as centers. For example, Pat Elflein is down on the list because he's listed as an offensive lineman. So there's a few scenarios like that where guys are kind of listed, for example, offensive lineman or defensive lineman or whatever. So they're a little out of order. But for the most part, the position groups are in there together. So it should be easy for us to kind of count who's in and who's out. So first, we'll just look at these two centers. Bradley Bozeman obviously is on the roster. He's going to make it for sure. Incoming free agent from the Baltimore Ravens, quality player, very, very, very likely going to be a starter, projected by everyone to be a starter. And then Tecklenburg, we're going to see. We're gonna call Tecklenburg a maybe. I'm not going to count him yet. We'll go through. We'll get our initial count, and we'll go back through and find guys who are on the fringe. He's a guy who he's a Baylor guy, so that's always good if you're on a Matt Rule team, if you're trying to make a roster. And he got into some games last year, so he's a maybe. But then that brings us to the corners, which is a lot harder of a discussion because there's talent everywhere. So obviously we're going to start with J.C. Horn, C.J. Henderson, Dante Jackson. Rashawn Melvin's a maybe. He's the only guy who didn't report to training camp today. I forget it was Rule or Fitter or somebody said he was dealing with a personal matter or whatever, but he wasn't there. So he's a fringe guy as it is. So obviously not being here, even if it's for a good reason, it doesn't help to not be able to put your best foot forward. So anyway, we got those three guys, Henderson, Horn, Jackson, and then we'll go down. Keith Taylor, great player. Well, potentially be a great player in my opinion. He's one of those big, long corners. I think, he's going to have a chance to get on the field this year. I like Stanley Thomas Oliver. I think at the very least he's a good special teams player. Excuse me. So that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there. That's 5 corners. And then you have Kalen Barnes, who was drafted in the 7th round. 6th round? 6th round, I think. End of the draft. He was the last draft pick the Panthers had. 6th or 7th round, I can't remember. But he ran one of the fastest combine times ever. And I think the fastest ever for this position. So he's a very speedy guy. Obviously, he's a one-trick pony. But a lot of people are critical of his actual ability to play corner. So we'll see how that translates over camp. He's going to be a maybe as well. So we'll come back to him. Another guy I would keep an eye on is down here, Westry, Chris Westry, cornerback. I think he might be a Baylor guy too, actually. Oh, no, Kentucky. That's right. He's a guy that's interesting because I think he's in that 6'2", 6'4" range. And anytime you have that kind of length at the corner position, you bring something to the table that a lot of players at that position don't have. Regardless of how good they are, they don't have that type of frame. So he brings something to the table that not everybody can do. So will he make this team? I don't know. We're pretty deep at corner, at defensive back in general. So it might be hard for him to make, the Panthers roster, but I think there could be a future for him in the NFL. So maybe keep an eye on him. Miles Hartfield, you have to assume, is going to make the team. He started off last year as I believe the number 1 nickelback until he got hurt. And he's putting good minutes for the Panthers over the last few years when he's been healthy. So I would pencil him in too. So right there you're looking at 6 corners. So we'll put that down. So right now we have 1 center and 6 cornerbacks. Okay, so that'll bring us down to defensive ends. You got to assume Amari Barno is going to make the team, one of the Panthers draft picks. Again, pure speed off the edge. He ran, I think, a 4.3 40, something crazy like that, and he's a defensive end. So that's pretty unheard of. A guy with speed like that, learning behind a Brian Burns, who knows what could happen. So right off the bat, you look at Barno, Burns, Gross Matos, Marquise Haynes. Those are the 4 locks, okay? Then you have this group of guys behind them, Heron, Johnson, Jordan, Larkin. Now, out of this group, I would say probably Heron and Larkin have the best shot, but the team has been upfront about the fact that they want to add to the defensive end, to the defensive end group. So you can look at these 4 guys and you know that these guys are going to make the team. So we're going to say Barno, Burns, Gross Matos, and Haynes. So after those guys, the team has been open about the fact that they're looking to sign somebody else or trade for somebody to bring somebody else in. Carlos Dunlap has been a name that's been brought up a lot. I think the media actually asked Scott Fitter about that today in his press conference, and he was straight up like, yeah, we're staying in contact. And it was no secret that Dunlap had been in Charlotte and visited with the team. They just couldn't work out a contract that day. So between defensive end and defensive tackle, these are a couple more defensive ends. Between defensive end and defensive tackle, the Panthers have made it no secret that they might add some other players into the mix. All right, so now we're going to look at defensive tackles. Derek Brown, obviously, he's a lock starter, first-round pick. He's a guy that Panthers fans are a little disappointed in. We want to see him take that next step. We've seen how dominant he can be, but we want to see him become consistently dominant at that position, especially when you're taken in the top 10 at the position he plays. You're expected to be a game-changing player. And obviously he has all the potential in the world to do that. It's just that he hasn't been able to put it all together quite yet. So Derek Brown, that's a lock. Phil Hoskins has got to be a lock, I would think. He put in some good minutes last year as a rookie. He was a late-round pick last year. I think he was a 7th-round pick. He's been impressive. Then Ioannidis, player coming in from Washington. He's probably gonna be the other starter. Again, quality starting player. Similar to what was his name? Joe, the defensive tackle they brought in last year from the Titans. I'm sorry, his name's slipping my mind right now. But similar to that, just a quality starter in the NFL. He actually, going back a few years, had 2 back-to-back 8-sack seasons. So, we'll see what he can do. I think at that time he was playing defensive end, and he got moved into defensive tackle. I'm not exactly sure how that happened, but like I said, he did have 2 seasons where he had back-to-back 8-sack seasons. So that if he could do that type of thing at defensive tackle for the Panthers this year, that would be incredible. So that's 3 guys right there. And then you're looking at Davion Nixon and Bravion Roy would be the other 2 guys. Davion Nixon, another player who could take that next step and come in and produce some sacks for the Panthers on the interior. And Bravion Roy's been a pleasant surprise as another late-round pick at defensive tackle. The Panthers have drafted, 3 defensive tackles in the late rounds over the last 2-3 years, and they've all been pretty solid players. I've been impressed with what they've done with those at that position. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 defensive tackles is what we'll say. All right. So I'll add that to the list. And then we'll move on to fullback. So Richie's the only fullback on the roster. We'll leave him as a maybe. I mean, he'll probably be there because he's the only fullback on the roster. It just depends on if they want to keep a fullback or not. But I would imagine that they will want to keep a fullback. They've talked a lot about being committed to the run and being physical, and they rebuilt the offensive line so they could run the ball and dominate teams up front. So I would imagine they would want to at least have a fullback on the roster. So as a matter of fact, we'll just go ahead and put him down as the one fullback on the team. So then that moves us down to guards. And like I said, there's a couple guys who are listed as offensive lineman. Now, Deontay Brown's interesting. I think he's a guy that a lot of Panthers fans have really had high hopes for ever since he's been drafted. Excuse me, out of Alabama, but he hasn't really made it work in the NFL. He just hasn't, and he hasn't even made it on the field that I can recall. So we'll see if he can get it done in training camp and find his way on the roster. We'll count him for now, but if we need to cut guys later, I wouldn't be surprised if Deontay Brown's not a Panther at the end of training camp. We'll see what happens. So we'll say 1, Austin Corbett obviously is going to be a starting player. 2, Dennis Daly. I would say 3. In my opinion, I would rather have Daly than Michael Jordan or Mike Horton. So we'll say 3. Pat Elfine is listed as a guard center. We'll put him as 4. We'll list him as a guard. So we'll say 4 guards. Okay. Then Zane Gonzalez is the kicker, obviously. He just signed a new contract, so he's here to stay. Good for him. Glad to have him. He was one of the few consistencies the Panthers had last year. Shout out to my boy Zane Gonzalez. All right, so now let's look at some linebackers. To me, and I got to think hard before I say this, I think linebacker might be the weakest position for the Panthers this year. I think a lot of people are pretty high on them, and I get it. There's a lot of good athletes back there, but as far as their ability to, be game changers in that second level, I don't really see it. I hope they prove me wrong, but we'll see what happens. But let's go down the list, see how many of them we can pick out here. So Corey Littleton, free agent signed from the Rams. He was the Rams 2 years ago. He was with the Raiders last year. So he's going to be 1. Frankie Louvu, fan favorite. We all love Frankie Louvu. Frankie Louvu. We'll count him as 2. Brandon Smith, rookie linebacker from Penn State. Panthers traded up in the 4th round to grab him, I believe it was. Again, great athlete. He's got all the skills to do it. He's got the measurables to do it, the athleticism to do it. He's just got to put it all together. We'll say 3. I like Julian Stanford. Let's see how many linebackers we have before we count him. Oh, so there you go. That's the end of the linebackers already. Wait, where's Shaq Thompson? Oh, you know what? Shaq Thompson might. Yeah, he's all the way at the bottom because he's on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list. Yeah, so he's basically on like preseason IR. He should be back by week 1. Whoa, what happened? All right, let's scroll back up to the linebackers. All right, so let's try to recount that. Oh, and Damian Wilson also was a free agent. We got to assume he'll make the team as well. He came from Jacksonville. Whoa. What's this website doing to me? All right. So Damian Wilson 1. We'll count Stanford 2, 3, 4, 5. And then Shaq Thompson will eventually be the 6th linebacker. So we'll say 6 linebackers. Those are the guys I would expect to make the team. Obviously you never know what's going to happen. Wow, this keeps scrolling down on me. All right, so now we're looking at dude. All right, we're looking at long snappers. We don't know which one it's going to be. Probably J.J. Jansen, I guess. I don't know. Thomas Fletcher was drafted last year. I don't know what their plan is with these long snappers. I mean, it feels like they're just going to let J.J. Jansen keep going until he can't anymore, and then that's when it'll be Thomas Fletcher's time. I don't know what they're doing, but either way, there's going to be 1 long snapper on the roster. Oh, and then down here is what I was talking about. These guys are listed as offensive linemen. So Cade Mays will probably be that other offensive lineman. So I'm going to list him with the guards just so we don't forget about him. So we'll say 5 guards instead of 4 guards. Hecker will be the punter. That's obvious. So 1 punter. And then that brings us to the quarterbacks. Now, we can assume the 3 quarterbacks will be Corral, Baker, and Sam. No surprise there. But I will say this, in the interviews going into training camp today, I was very intrigued by what Matt Corral had to say, because as far as everything's gone ever since, especially since the Baker Mayfield trade happened, everyone's assumed it's a 2-man race. And Matt Corral did not have that attitude at all when he showed up to camp today. And he straight up said, I want to be the starting quarterback. So I think it's cool that he's, got that competitive edge in him, which we already knew about him. But the fact that he's not willing to just roll over and give that position away says a lot about who he is as a competitor. And I'm excited to see what he can do. I'm a little worried his competitive might get the best of him, but we'll see. Hopefully he can keep a cool head, and we'll see what he can do as far as earning that job. PJ Walker, fan favorite, XFL MVP, unfortunately is probably going to be the odd man out, unless something crazy happens. And I kind of mentioned this on a previous episode. If there's an injury in the NFL going into the season, early on in the season, during the preseason, during training camp, whatever, and a team finds themselves in a position where they need a serviceable NFL quarterback, Sam Darnold might find himself on another team. Even PJ Walker might find himself on a team. One of these guys could get traded. But if Sam Darnold gets traded, that would obviously open the door for PJ Walker to be that third quarterback. We'll see what happens. But obviously, as of right now, Matt Corral, Sam Darnold, and Baker Mayfield are assumed to be those 3 guys. So 3 quarterbacks. Now we're looking at running backs. It depends on what the team wants to do. They'll probably keep 3, I would assume. And those guys would be Dante Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, and Christian McCaffrey, obviously. Keep an eye on Spencer Brown. He's a guy I liked a lot last year. We'll see if he can build on, that momentum he built during last year's preseason, and whether he can maybe not make the roster, but make a roster somewhere, or, turn some heads in training camp, prove that he belongs. I don't see him beating out any, obviously not McCaffrey, but either of these other 2 guys. But, crazier things have happened, or the Panthers could keep 4 running backs. We'll keep that in mind when we come back through and try to pick out those extra guys, depending on what this total looks like. Brings us to safeties, Justin Burris. Team loves Justin Burris, so obviously he's going to be one of the guys who stays. He started last year as a starter until he got hurt. I won't say it's obvious, but there's a good chance he'll be there. Team's kind of deep at safety, though. Same with Sean Chandler. He's a guy they like who's, played – I believe he started. He's played many games for the Panthers over the last couple of years. But this is the big one here. The Panthers brought in Xavier Woods, who's a starting caliber safety. So he's going to be back there with Jeremy Chin. These other guys are fighting to make the team. So how many guys is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I would imagine they would keep 5 at the most, So if we're going to let's pick 5 and see where that puts us. 1 guy gets cut. In my personal opinion, I'd probably pick that one person to be Sean Chandler. And he's a guy I like. He's a pretty good safety. It's just, the Panthers are pretty deep at this position. I really like Kenny Robinson. I think he's got a ton of potential. I like Sam Franklin. I think he's put in quality minutes for the Panthers in, regular season games. He's made plays. And actually, the same could be said for Robinson as well. I believe he scored on a blocked punt last year, if I remember correctly. Chandler's had good minutes too. But if I'm going to pick my 5, I'm going to go with those guys. I would say Chandler's the odd man out. So I'm going to put 5 safeties. And that goes with, how many corners did we say? 6 corners. So that would be 11 defensive backs. That's kind of a lot. It's not crazy, but we'll see what happens. All right, so Brady Christensen, obviously. Ikemi Kwanu, whose name I've been practicing to say a lot lately, is obviously making the team. First-round draft pick, 7th overall. Pick 7th, right? 6th, 7th, whatever it was. Potential superstar. Hopefully both of those guys honestly have all the potential in the world, and the team wants them to grow into being great players. And I think they will be. I really have a a good feeling about those two guys moving forward. Obviously, Taylor Moton is a star tackle. And then Cameron Irving will probably be that guy. We'll see. I'll say Cameron Irving now, but obviously he's shown us in the past that he's kind of terrible. So, maybe he'll be okay as a backup. Starter definitely wasn't his thing. So we'll say 4 tackles, with Miller being the odd man out. But obviously, as bad as Cam Irving was at times last year, it wouldn't be a shock to see him lose that spot. All right, so then we're going to look at the tight ends. I would imagine 3 tight ends. Probably these guys, Ian Thomas, Colin Thompson, and Tommy Trimble. I'm going to go with 3 tight ends and say that those are going to be the 3 just to make it easy on us. All right, so then that brings us to wide receivers, which the Panthers have a pretty good core at wide receiver. The only sleeper on this list, I think, is going to be – there he is. Charleston Rambo from Miami. He was a very good player in college, and a lot of people I talk to think he might have a shot, but it's going to be very difficult for him to crack this top 6 or 7, how many wide receivers they want to keep. So let's start at the top real quick. All right. Robbie Anderson. Obviously, we can expect he'll make the team. It's been a weird off season for Robbie Anderson, but we can expect he'll make the team. Rashard Higgins is going to be another guy, especially, he has a bit of a history with Baker Mayfield. He's a former Cleveland Brown. He's done a lot of good things in the NFL. I'd recommend go checking out his highlights if you've never seen him. Keith Kirkwood, I don't see him making the roster. He's a guy we like. He's one of Matt Rule's guys from Temple, I believe, and former New Orleans Saint. But I don't see him making the team. Not a bad player. I just don't see him making the team. So that's 1, 2. Terrace Marshall's going to be 3. Hopefully he's, on course for a breakout season. We'll see what happens with him. So that's 3. DJ Moore is 4, star receiver. Andre Roberts we need as in special teams. He's going to be the return man for sure. 5, Zalistra's on the roster still. 6. And I'd hate to see Shi Smith go, but if you hadn't heard, he got himself into some legal trouble. So that could be his job. We'll see. We'll say 7 wide receivers just to include him, and let's see what that puts our total at. 7, 11, 16, 17, 22, 23, 29, 30, 31, 34, 37, 42, 46, 49, 56. So out of all the guys that we just kept, we got to cut 3 guys down. So I would say one of those receivers, probably Shi Smith, would be the one to go out of the guys we just looked at. So that's unfortunate. We all love Shi Smith, but I don't see how he would make the roster. 6 linebackers. I guess we'd have to cut a linebacker, even though 6 is not a lot of linebackers. 6 corners. That'd probably be a position where you can only keep 5. So it'd be interesting which one to go. It would probably come down to Hartsfield and Stanley Thomas Oliver for that last spot. So that would be something to keep an eye on. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah. That's not even counting Kalen Barnes, who was one of the Panthers draft picks and has one of the fastest ratings in Madden this year. So even once you cut those guys down, you're down to 54. You still need to cut 1 more player. So then, man, I mean, it's tough. Panthers have a competitive roster this year, and that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted to have competition. But anyway, I don't know. You can pick the last guy out of the guys we said. Maybe Julian Stanford would be that last guy. That'd be a good guess. I don't know. Anyway, that would get it down to 53. So anyway, that's the 53 to 56 man projection for the Panthers roster this year. Yeah, I don't know. Can't wait to watch it play out, man. Training camp's here. Let's do it. I'm excited. If you're still here, thanks for watching. like, subscribe. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.